see now. Papa got bitch, make it hit
come down. Oh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. Never have to cut you out like right now. You see, I don't have to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try the marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Shows you a couple of things and they feel the change. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip. Yeah, you plenty of
Welcome to the Seahawks Man to Man podcast, powered by The Athletic. Shout out to the company. My name is Michael Sean Dugar. I'm here with my co-host, Christopher Kidd. Make sure you follow us both up on the tweet machine. You guys know where to follow me at on there, so I'm just going to keep plugging the YouTube channel. That's Seahawks Man to Man on YouTube. We appreciate the love on there. Even if you're someone who listens on audio, just hit the subscribe button anyway. That's good for our numbers, so we appreciate that. Chris, talk to him.
What is up, everybody? It is your boy, Christopher Kidd. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206. And I have exciting news for you, Mike.
What's that?
We have officially reached.
Oh, we hit 1,000?
We're at 1K subscribers.
Hey.
So we want to thank all of you out there because now this allows us to do something simple and cool, which I think you shouldn't have 1,000 followers to do this, but now we can interact with you in comments and we can create a community. It's a lot better now, but I really don't understand why they made us wait to get to 1,000. They could have gave this to us at 500 because now Mike can give you updates on the YouTube channel.
That's dope.
It'll be cool. It'll be like a live feed. So basically anything that Mike tweets, I can put on the YouTube channel so that our subscribers can know right then and there, breaking news, whatever happens. So I don't know why we had to wait up to 1,000, but we are at 1,000. So again, we want to thank every single one of you out there that have subscribed to our YouTube channel. The Doug Baldwin interview is up there. So go tap in if you haven't. It's a really good interview. So please go and check that out. But without further ado, we have to talk about some football here. And as you can see on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, it says why it's an end of an era. Hey, Mike, why do you think this is an end of an era for the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, I think that's really important to talk about because everyone watched the game. We're recording like the day after the Seahawks lost to the Washington football team. They lost 17-15. I think that's the third straight loss or something like that. The team's 3-8. Their chances of making the playoffs are about 1%, depending on which site you use. 538.com is around there. I think ESPN's Football Power Index has them around something very similar to 1%. I haven't checked Football Outsiders and their metrics, but once you're around the 1% range, like it starts time to looking forward to the draft. Problem is they don't have a first round pick. So I understand. I wrote about this in The Athletic. I understand why the players in the building and Pete Carroll are like, look, we are going to believe. And I think it starts with three people. Pete, he's got this whole always compete attitude. Fine. That's cool. He'll never think that there's not a chance till there's mathematically, like literally not a chance. Cool. Russell Wilson, neutral thinking, staying positive thoughts, self-talk. I think that's part of who Russ is. Now, I know that's part of who Russ is. So he'll never give up either. He said it on Monday night. He was like, look, I don't know any other way. I don't know how to think another way. And that's important. Bobby Wagner, he's a similar way. His is more spiritual, I think. He's really into meditating and yoga and just being present in who you are as a person. I think he's religious too. But the point is, those three people are the three leaders in the building, and those three are never going to give up. And so that just trickles down to everyone else. That's cool and fine. Like I wrote on Monday night, we don't have to do that with them. We don't have to. Because Chris, man, this is a wrap.
We keeping it a buck.
Yeah, and I think everyone else is. There's no reason for anyone else outside of the building to think like they think logically. There's too much evidence to the contrary. And that's why after the Packers game, I think we talked about the offense might be broken, right? And that was after they scored 0 for the first time without Russ. And I thought that was a very good time to suggest that it's broken. And then right after the game, the Arizona game, I tweeted the Russ and Pete era was fun while it lasted. And while a lot of people were like, yeah, it is, some people were still like, Mike, what do you mean, man? We could still beat the Washington football team. We can go 7-0, 10-7. I'm like, guys, I'm not pulling that type of sentiment out of my ass, right? Just because I don't attach it to a quote or a story or an anecdote doesn't mean that it's just a thought I just came up with in a press box, sober, because there's no beer allowed in the Lumen Field press box. So that's when we get to the Washington football game, them playing Washington. It's like, guys, And I don't know how much more you guys got to see to know that this is a wrap. And when I say this, and I tried to spell it out in a tweet last night too, I said there's specifically, when I mean end of an era, there's no reason to have Pete, John, and Russ in their same roles next year. There's no reason for that. But I want to focus on two people before we get into Twitter questions, because I think this is probably one of our best batch of questions. You could tell people are really aligned with where the theme of the show has been for the last month or so. On the Pete side of this, it's important to note that this season, while it's bad, this is the most games they've ever lost with Russ. They have 8 losses. They lost 7 in 2017. Although you can argue that if there was a 17th game in 2017, they might have lost 8 games that year too. But anyway, the Pete thing is not just, Pete's had one bad year with Russ, why blow it up? Right? Because I think if you look at it in a vacuum like that, it's like, that's a fair question. Like, Mike, this guy's the winningest coach ever here. He gets one bad year and you think it's the end of the era with the best quarterback in franchise history? How do we get there? Overreaction a little bit? Hell no. Here's why. On the Pete side of this, remember, Pete controls the personnel. That's very, very, very important. If there's a draft pick you think sucks, Pete pressed a button on that. Maybe he didn't do all the scouting on that or whatever. He pressed a button on it. So if you don't like the Jermaine Ifedi picks or specifically the defensive players, I would lean towards being a Pete thing. LJ's and Malik McDowell's, and give me some more bad defensive players they've picked.
Lano Hill.
Yeah, Lano Hill, top 100 pick.
Tedrick Thompson.
Tedrick was like pick 111 or something like that in that range, early 4th, I think. So yeah, Tedrick, Lano, like I said, LJ. I think Jordan Brooks is still coming into his own. Like, that's Jerry's still out on
Cody Barton.
Yeah, Cody Barton, Marquise Blair, guys who are taking. These are all top 100 picks. But this is where you build guys. This is where you find guys, and that you're blowing that. And then you talk about some back end stuff that hasn't worked either, and why the trades they've made, the contracts they've given out, the contracts they haven't given out. Like, if you're upset with the roster as it's constructed, if you watch the roster at any point and go, man, we can't defend a screen. We can't, and look at that. That's a roster decision. They had the best screen defender in the league. They didn't sign him.
Right.
The guy they used to replace him spent like 2 months of the season not knowing how to cover screens, right? And even yesterday, Washington ran a bunch of them. So I think that, like, those are things you have to point to. It's not just, they're bad this year, or even Mike Pete's a defensive coach and the defense is figuring it out. Sure. But they've had to figure it out because they've been asked to start the last 2 seasons, like historically bad. For the first 4 weeks, the first 6 weeks of the last like 2 seasons, you keep seeing stats like, yeah, the Seahawks are giving up the most yards since the such and such, and it's usually like one of those bad Saints teams or something like that. Like, they've been historically bad and had to just become elite just to get in like the average range. And so, like, those things again fall on your head coach for personnel, for the philosophy, the whole bend don't break thing. Having to make all of these trades to make up for these picks. Like, if the Lano Hill pick or the Marquise Blair pick worked out, they wouldn't have needed Jamal Adams. They wouldn't have needed Quandre. I like both of those players, but they needed them because of previous failures. Like, that doesn't mean that you're doing your job right. And I think those are Pete things. Like, how they got here, where they're paying guys like Kerry Hyder and Carlos Dunlap, and Carlos can't play more than 9 snaps in a game or something like that. And the only time you see him on screen is when he's committing a penalty or knocking a pass down, not sacking the quarterback. What is he got? Half a sack this year?
I think it's 1 sack, Mike.
Oh boy.
I'll put it this way. He's not playing well at all this season. I'll say that much.
Yeah. And yes, you're right. And I think that it's stuff like that. Like, I like the Carlos trade. The Carlos trade was really good. I thought the extension was really good. The problem is you needed to do those things because of what you weren't getting from guys that you drafted. Like, if Rasheem Green ended up being a stud, although shout out to him, he probably had the best play of the day again that Monday night game. But like, if he was like a real deal stud, like, you're going to be like number 1 pass rusher, TJ Watt type of stud, which is hard to find in the second round or whatever he was picked, 3rd round. But if he was going to be that, you wouldn't need Carlos. Right? If Malik McDowell panned out, you wouldn't need to trade for a Sheldon Richardson. Like, all these things that they've had to do to mask the way to build a roster the fastest way and the most cost-effective way, which is through the draft. Once you miss on draft picks, your whole team building philosophy is screwed. Then you have to go to free agency. Well, the Seahawks don't like going to free agency to pay guys. And when they do pay guys, they pay the wrong guys. They give guys like Luke Jokel $7 million. They give guys like Greg Olsen $7 million. Or Eddie Lacy, give him a contract instead of like, rolling with guys like Mike Davis or J.D. McKissick or whatever. Shout out to J.D. McKissick at the revenge game. Like, these are all roster moves that get you here. They spent 2 years not being able to run the ball in 2016 and 2017. Whose fault is that? 2016, they drafted 3 running backs. Chris, trivia. Can you name the 3 running backs they drafted in 2016? So Marshawn retired, and they took 3 backs in 2016. You can't look it up.
Was it?
30 seconds.
Oh, shoot. 2016. Was it Christine Michael?
Nope. Timer start. I give you 20 seconds. I don't want too long.
Dang, who was it? I don't even remember. 2016, 3 running backs. And clearly, Thomas Rawls was one.
Nope.
No, because they picked him up in free agency. Jeez, I don't know, Mike. I can't even name you the 3 guys that they drafted in 2016. The impact was none.
Is the point. Like, they drafted 3 dudes in the same draft. I'm pulling it up right now. I thought I knew the answer off the top of my head. If you'd have said them, I would have known. But
if I would have said them.
The 3 were CJ Prosise.
Hang on.
CJ Prosise was one. He was a 90th pick.
Dang it. Okay.
Alex Collins was the other one. He was picked with 71 in the fifth round, and then Zach Brooks out of Clemson in the 7th round.
I would have never got Zach Brooks. I'll be honest.
And so that was their like post Marshawn plan, right? Like, it was to load up on running backs. None of them panned out. Well, Alex is like the starter now, but he done been on a couple other teams and had to come back. And even then, they're still not good at running the ball. Alex didn't pan out. CJ obviously didn't pan out. And then you get Chris Carson in 2017, and that's like kind of half panning out, even though we like Chris. And my point is, again, these are roster things. Like, the team can't run the ball right now. Whose job is it to draft linemen who can run block and draft running backs who can run? Basically, Pete's whole run scheme is like, if we have Chris Carson, it works. My man, you cannot build a run scheme around relying on having Chris there. That's just what it is. His availability has just not been there. He's been on IR like 4 times in 5 years or something like that. Like, he's just not there. These are roster things. So when you get to like, well, Mike, why give up on this now? It's like, what it took to get here is important. We got here because of failures on failures on failures. And obviously there's good roster moves in there too. The Quandre Diggs move was fine. What's some other good ones? I like the Dwayne Brown trade. What else was good? I thought the Clowney trade was good.
I was going to say that, but I backed up.
Yeah, the Clowney trade was fine. But you only need to do the Clowney trade because of the Frank thing, right? And then Frank makes the Pro Bowl and his team wins the Super Bowl for reasons that aren't because of Frank. But
getting Carlos Dunlap last season that helped. Just hasn't helped this season.
And that was because they chose not to, sign any pass rusher in free agency, really, other than like Benson. And, I think they came back with Brandon Jackson that year before he hurt his neck in the training camp. Like, they just basically haven't make the investment. Then it's like, oh, shoot, now we have to make the investment mid-year. Not sustainable. They're trying to build a roster in unsustainable ways. And it left them with 3 draft picks in this last draft class. And none of them are going to really. Trey's already out for the year. They're allergic to throwing D the ball or putting the ball in his hands, really. And then Stone Forsythe hasn't played at all on offense this year. So it's like, these are roster things. It's been trending downward for a while, specifically in the draft. And I think that is where, the Ziggy Ansah contracts, there's a million contracts. Like I said, Eddie Lacy, Jokel. There's just been all these bad decisions that have led to having to fix stuff with other moves. And I think that's where, from the Pete side, of why you would give up so soon. It's like, that's why you're controlling the ship, and the ship has slowly been sinking. Now we're just getting to where like your ship is sinking on national TV a lot more, so people will care. Right? And that's the Pete side. I feel like I'm missing a really big move that they did that was positive that I should give them some credit for. But
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, drafting DK was good. I think that was a good.
Is it good, Mike? Because they're not using DK.
Yeah, that's another thing we'll get to, but. Yeah, like that was a good draft. They've done some good drafting. Damian Lewis, good draft pick, but like burned pick 58 on Ethan Posick in 2017. Like, it's just too many misses versus the hits to like sustain a dominant roster. And the Russ side is something we hinted at last time. Someone asked about it, I think, in the Twitter questions. They asked about like if you take a 17 game sample or something like that. So going back from 2010 against week 10 against the Rams. To I think it was up to the Cardinals game. Like that's a full year of, including the playoff game against the Rams. It's like a full year of tape on Russ and numbers. He's been pretty bad in that run, and I think that is where, on the Russ side of this, there's like no reason for you to continue with Pete, because Pete, it's his job. If you're gonna have Russ, here's the best way I'll do this. If you're gonna have Russ, your job is to have a really good running game, right? Because that's the play action thing. Like Russ needs that, right? Russ needs a running game too. He just does, at least to be a championship caliber player consistently. Needs a running game. He needs a really good defense. So there's just no point in having Pete there if he's not going to build those things over time and then have Russ. Now, if you get another quarterback who doesn't have the same like needs, like every quarterback could use a good run game and a good defense, but like some guys need that, like I think like Jimmy Garoppolo needs that. Russ is better than Jimmy, but you get the point. Although Russ hasn't been much better than Jimmy in the last year or so. So I think the other thing about Russ, while it's like, all right, cool, you have these things that you need to succeed. You need, a certain type of schemer. You need a certain type of run game. You need a competent defense around you, right? All right, cool. If these guys can't bring that to you, then why should you guys still coexist? Now, I guess you can be like, all right, get rid of Russ or get rid of Pete or whatever. I don't care who you get rid of. I think the point of this now 15-minute spiel is that it's not just, Russ is having a bad year, Pete's having a bad year coaching, so let's just blow it up. No, this has been building. For Russ, it's probably been building for quite some time, since they've I think 2015 was the last time they were really good on third down, and they just kind of not been good, and now it's just kind of hit rock bottom. Now they're like the worst third down team, but they've been trending that way for quite a bit. Russ has been trending towards not being elite at least since last year, and then change the coordinator out and nothing changes. Actually, it gets a little worse, right? So it's like, all right, it's not the schemers, it's more of like what's being built around Russ. So those are two most I got four fingers up, but those are the most important people in the organization, Russ and Pete. There's really what we're seeing now, and I wrote this as well. It was just a nationally televised version of the inevitable. This was always going to be this bad. If you talk to people, and when I tweeted this, I said, how bad they are on offense is not totally unsurprising depending on who you talk to. And I meant that. There are people that, someone sent me a quote from like 2013, being really critical of the same things they're bad at now. And it was like, look, we can't move the ball. We have way too much talent on offense to not be able to move the ball. Teams are knowing we want to throw deep, and we got to be able to counter that. And these were all quotes from like 2013 and 14. When the team was winning, people were saying these things. People in the building saying these things. It's like, these aren't new problems. They just aren't being masked. Is that how you say it? Masked?
Yep.
They aren't being masked. There you go. By a great run game and a great defense. And if you're Pete and you ain't giving Russ a great run defense, or you ain't even get Pete, if you ain't giving Russ a great run game and a great defense, what do we have you for? Now, if you want a new quarterback, sure, but like I said, there's no reason to have both. That's why man, that was way too long. But I think that's the part people are missing here. It's like, you have to. I think that's on us, or mostly me, because I've been the one saying, "Hey, the era is over." Well, why is it over? Well, because it ain't just this year that has been trending towards this. You don't just magically get this bad. You don't. You build towards being this bad, and now it just happens to hit rock bottom because Russ's finger ain't right. Chris is hurt again, and their defense has no pass rush. I guess a lot of stuff, Chris, that's pretty bad. Monday was like a big old shit show, but a very predictable shit show, depending on who you talk to the last like year and change.
The writing was on the wall.
Good way to put that.
It's unfortunate that it's come to this, but you can slowly see it. There was the comment of, Russ has never been hurt. There's going to be a time where he might go down. Unfortunately, it was this season. It all just piled up. The Seahawks are winning close games last year by 1 point. They're losing all those close games. Everything flipped.
2019 too. 2019, a lot of one-score wins. That's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's all the things that everyone clamored and was happy about is now turned on them. And that's just how it goes sometimes. It's football. You're not gonna be the Patriots every year. They had something built in the system, they rolled with it, and they were able to win. The Seahawks haven't had that success consistently since, 2014, 13. That was kind of like the last hoorah. That was kind of it.
The 2015 Seahawks are really good.
Okay, 2015. So it's been what? My math serves 6 years.
I ain't counting on this on air. damn all that. Yeah, it's been a little bit though. To your point, yeah,
they have to do something. And you saw what the Patriots did. They said, you know what, Brady's leaving. We're gonna go draft. They did it that way. You saw what the Packers did. We're gonna get rid of our coach and stick with Aaron Rodgers. There are two ways to do it. Personally, I don't think Pete is Bill Belichick. I see it more as a Green Bay scenario. And Mike, you touched on, I think, 2 weeks ago. I think the Seahawks should keep Russ. Why? Because Russ is still an elite quarterback. I get it. He's not playing well this season. If you go look on the timeline, well, you're not going to look at the timeline. If you were on Twitter yesterday on Monday night, you saw a lot. Oh, bench him, get Geno in. Okay, you have Geno in there. They
wanted Geno last night?
Oh, I saw a lot of tweets clamoring for Geno Smith. And in my head, I'm thinking, if you put Geno in, you have basically said the game is over.
You can't go back to Russ if you put Geno in. That's the problem with doing that.
I'll get there with that. You're going to punt on Russell Wilson, who I told someone on Twitter, I said, I don't want them to run the ball. Just do play action. And Sam even said this with us last week. He said, just play action the whole time. I don't care.
Shout out to Sam Gold.
Do a play action. And you saw what happened. A play action pass that was completed to Ty Lockett for 50-plus yards. Cool. Keep doing it. They went back to it every now and then, but I'd rather the Seahawks continue to play action pass it than to keep trying to run the football where it's going nowhere. And if you want to give up on Russ, you won't have that opportunity to tie the game with 15 seconds left. Geno, I don't know if Geno's leading them 96 yards. He had an opportunity. He could. He did against the Rams. He did against the Rams, but had another opportunity against Pittsburgh, and we saw what happened. TJ Watt made a big play. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he's not going to get it done, but I'd rather stick with Russell Wilson, who I was confident was going to lead them down the field and get a touchdown and then get a 2-point conversion. Unfortunately, Kendall Fuller made an incredible play and was able to stop that. But I was not going to give up on Russ because he's having a bad game. And it's going to be crazy. If Russell Wilson leaves the Seahawks, I kid you not, if he goes off on another team and then is back to old Russ, the Seahawks fans are going to be really upset. They're going to be hurt. Because now you're going to have some quarterback, whether you draft one, whether you trade for one, that's not going to be the guy. Not a Hall of Famer, probably not. Is he going to get you 10 wins? Think about it. Outside of this season, you're getting 10 wins with Russell Wilson. He finds a way. This year, it's not happening. It's just not going to happen. I said 8-9. Sam Gold said 6-11. Mike didn't want to give an answer.
I still don't. It's a week-to-week thing.
Look at that. It's a week-to-week thing.
It is. You never know who's going to be on the team, who's going to be healthy. I
say all that to say that play Russ throughout the rest of the season. He'll figure it out. I don't think he's going to have I don't know how many bad games he has left because I didn't think he's going to have a bad game against the Washington football team. Sure, you look at the stats. He throws for 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. You say, Chris, how's that a bad game? If you watch the game, they should have won that game. DK, get him the rock. Ty Lockett could have got him the mark more. They try to run the ball. It didn't make any sense. The game plan was a mess. It was over. I don't know what else to say anymore. I think it's time to get the Twitter questions. It's just been a really, really bad season, and it was a bad game. They have an opportunity against the 49ers, but I don't expect them to win that game, to be completely honest with you. I don't see how they can get it done. Everything is a mess right now. The only positive I see right now is that the defense is figuring things out. The defense is playing pretty damn good football. Sure, they gave up 17 points to Taylor Heineke and that Washington football team. The run game, they got torched a little bit. 29 carries, 117 yards. He was just running it. They were giving it to him in and out. But at this point, Mike, the season has been over. I thought, to be honest, I'll be probably one of not too many people that thought the season might have been over after Russ hurt his finger against the Rams. I'll be the first to admit I was like, damn, this might be it. No Russ for a month. I don't see how they're going to win. Looking at the schedule, too, that was tough. And it showed. They went 1-2, and then Russ comes back. They haven't won. There you go.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to throw in there before we get to the Twitter questions. I could see a world where Pete's on a new team and Russ is on a new team, and both of them excel in those new teams. I just think that this thing has run its course.
Oh.
I think, yeah, that like if I'll throw it. Let's say they fire Urban Meyer, and Pete goes to the Jaguars, replaces him, and they trade Russ to the Saints, get a bunch of picks, and Jameis or whatever, not Taysom Hill, please no, and whatever, Simeon, whatever. You just get a bunch of picks, maybe the players or something like that, and Russ gets paired up with Sean Payton. I could see both of those, Pete and Russ, excelling in their new roles on their new team. I don't think those two are like they've been bad at their jobs recently. Russ most in the last like calendar year and the last 12 months or whatever, and then Pete at the personnel side of his job, he's been pretty poor for quite some time. But I mean, you see all the time where a coach just underperforms somewhere else and then goes somewhere else and kind of figures it out, whether he learns, takes a year off or whatever. And a quarterback, sometimes a change of scenery does really, can help you. I think like Alex Smith is an interesting example going from San Francisco to Kansas City. Even Washington with Kirk going from there to Minnesota. Like there is some situations where you can just go somewhere else and, get your groove back or whatever, depending on the play caller that you're with. I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the teams that Russ had on his list were teams they had guys who were considered better play callers than Pete. He went to go to the Raiders. John Gruden's considered offensive mind. Where did he also want to go? Dallas, where they got Kellen Moore.
Chicago.
I don't know. That one didn't make sense. I don't know what Russ was thinking there. And the other team, I think it was New Orleans. Was it New Orleans?
Yeah, it was the Saints.
Play with Sean Payton. Like, Russ, there's a world where both of them leave and do fine. That sucks for us, but they would do fine. Like, I just think this particular thing has run its course with those two, and that's important to note. It's not just this year. It's been festering for a little bit, as we will probably discuss here with some of these brilliant Twitter questions from our listeners.
Well, we got a bunch. We're going to answer as many as we can because, boy, I feel like we got 1,000. We had 72, and I'm like, damn. I wish they would have won.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to try to keep them. I got my stopwatch ready. I'm not going to go long-winded if I don't have to.
Well, I mean, if you do, this will be a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, see, I don't want to do that. I need to get some sleep. I slept in seat 22F on a Delta flight, from DC, so that's not enough.
Let's challenge ourselves to do this in 30 minutes.
All right. Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Give it a shot. Let's see if we can do it, guys. All right. Which candidates could you look at for the head coaching spot if the Seahawks decide to split ways? And then follow up. Where do you think games are won in the National Football League? Position group, defensive line, offensive line, DB, QB. If you had to pick two positions, what would they be?
Okay. I will go the coach thing first. I have to do a lot more research if I really endorse a coach, but like Kellen Moore is the one that jumps out. I know he's been mentioned for a bunch of coaching jobs in college. I'm like, why would he do that? Why would you go from the offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys to anything in college? Like, for real, there's no college job that is like a natural step up from kicking butt as the OC of the Cowboys. That's crazy to me. So yeah, he's one I would consider. Like, if they were to just, all right, let's go find an offensive mind. Let's run with Kellen. I don't know a ton about Byron Leftwich, but he's an interesting one. And then obviously Eric Bieniemy. Those would probably be my top three. Maybe I'm missing somebody, but for me personally, that's probably where I would go. I just think that, and I'm with the homie Shil Kapadia on this, you hire an offensive guy, because if you hire a defensive guy, your success is probably going to rely on whether he hires a good offensive guy. And then if he's an offensive guy, you're just going to lose him anyway after like 2 years when your offense is good. As you're seeing with like Tennessee, and what you're probably starting to see with some other teams, when they hire a good offensive coordinator and they have a defensive-minded head coach, the OCs just keep getting poached. And you have to keep finding a new one. So to avoid that problem, get you a McVay or Shanahan, an offensive-minded head coach. So those are the names that pop out to me. Maybe I have some more as the year progresses. The second part of that was what wins, or what position groups win the most. There's a couple ways to go with that. I would probably lean towards offensive line and quarterback, just because I think there's a direct correlate. I don't have to think there's a direct correlation. If you score more points than the other team, then you'll win. Literally every game. That's just the goal of football, score more points than the other team. So if you increase the ways that you can score, right? What do I need? I need a good old line to block for my quarterback. And if my quarterback's nasty, then we're good. And then if we have a good old line, then we can run it as well. Because that's the key. It's all right, my quarterback's nasty, so they're trying to make us we're a throw first team, so they want to make us a run first team now. They want to take that explosive passing game away. Well, great. We have a great O-line, and it doesn't even matter if the running back's that good. I can get you a 4th round pick out of North Carolina, probably, and just run behind the best O-line in the league, and then I'd be fine. So I think those two position groups are the one where I would really want my GM to kill it at. Obviously, you don't want to suck at any group, but if you're building a team, give me 5 fat dudes who can block, and then give me a quarterback with a gun. And
that sounds
accurate. More. I want accuracy more than arm strength, to be clear. But like those two position groups, if you got it, look at the run. There's very few teams who have both of those things and then suck, unless they have historically bad defenses. For the most part, you give me a top 10 O-line and a top 10 quarterback, I give you a division winner at the very least.
That sounds like when we played flag football on Saturday mornings at Mercer, when I would say, hey, guys, don't draft a bunch of fast guys. How about you get some fat men that can protect you, so when you throw the ball, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Protection matters, and run blocking matters. That's where the Seahawks have really failed, is that you have the quarterback. Even if he's got limitations, you have to put a good O-line in front of him. After a while, you just won't. If you're not doing that, you won't succeed.
As we probably would all expect, you said you expect change will be coming. What would be the first step of change, and when do you think that'll be?
All right, I'm set the timer here. I don't think that they'll make any changes during the season. I just don't see any benefits. I mentioned that to someone on Twitter as well. I just don't. There's really no benefit. It doesn't send a message. It's just symbolic at this point. You still have to play the games, and it's the NFL. I think college is pretty stupid when they do this too. They fire one guy. It's like, I guess, like we still have all of the other same staff members who he hired, who probably weren't doing their jobs at a high level anyway. Now, we're Washington State grads, so we can see how firing one guy could have an impact, but at the same time, we fired 4 coaches, whereas you look at like the Huskies fired Jimmy Lake and was like, we still have all the same problems. Fired their OC and still had all the same problems. I know those are 2 college examples, but I think it's, our fan base is pretty local. So I think that illustrates, like, you don't really, like, look at the coaches who get fired during the year. Their teams don't usually just rally it out, right? They're usually just still bad, whether it's a Bill O'Brien or Dan Quinn, or I think who else got fired mid-seasons in recent years that are examples. I think Ron Rivera got canned around this time, whenever he did for Carolina. It's like, what did that do for Carolina? It's like, nothing. You can't interview coaches any sooner, right? You still have to wait until their seasons are over. I think they're tweaking that rule now, but to my knowledge, it hasn't changed. So yeah, I see no reason to. I just don't see the advantage, I guess, for like, oh, let's fire Pete today. Like, is that symbolic? Does that say, oh, middle finger to Pete Carroll? Like, sure, but what does that actually do? Does it make you any better going forward? I don't think. You're just putting other people in charge who they might not have been good at their jobs either. So I think that the first step to that question, or to what does change look like, is I really think it centers around the quarterback. I wrote that and I got a lot of this pushback. I was like last week or something. It's like, nah, you start with Pete Carroll. It's like, no, you fundamentally, if you're Jody Allen, you sit down, say, do I want Russell? Start there. Why? It gets real simple after that. Do I want Russell? Yes. All right. What am I willing to do to keep him? That's like your little flow chart. Do I want Russ? Yes. All right. What am I willing to do to keep him? Am I willing to get rid of Pete and John? Am I going to have to be? Like, the yes there, it gets you to your necessary steps. If the answer is no, you don't want Russ, I don't care what the answer is. I'm just saying, ask the question. If you want Russ, all right, if no, then get Pete and John up out of here, or then get him up out of here. Tell Pete and John they can trade Russ, and you go with them. I just think it's real simple to just like, all right, do I want Russ or not. That gives you the flow chart necessary to, get this thing rebuilt. I would probably lean towards what we talked about, like you said, keeping Russ. But either way, you just start with that fundamental question: do I want Russell Wilson? I think you can get into more questions, and someone else mentioned this too. The other question you can start with, and I think this is a fair one. First off, no one's getting rid of Pete and John unless that's what Russ wants. That's why I also don't think you start with the Russ, or you don't start with the staff. You start with the quarterback. You're not going to get rid of those two figures if that's not what Russ wants. In my head, the other part is someone said the question maybe is, what does Russell want? And I think you can start there too. I think that if you're Jody, you can go to Russ and like, hey, what actually do you want? Like, do you want to do this thing with us? Would you like me to get rid of them? Like, what do you want? So I think you do start with those questions, and honestly, in any form, in any order that Jody would like. But Jody Allen, owner of the team, Paul Allen's sister. You start with those questions, and when you get the answers, what does Russ want? Do I want Russ? When you get the answers to those questions, then you can start rebuilding. I'm gonna start writing about those questions and those answers in the coming month or whatever. But right now, I'm just saying that's where you start with the rebuild is asking those questions to the right people.
What's up with Carlos Dunlap's quiet season? He vanished practically overnight compared to what we saw from him last season.
Yeah, that's a really fair question. I mean, I think Carlos still is up there in pressures. He's got 18, which is not, it's fourth behind Kerry Hyder, Darrell Taylor, and Rasheem Green. Carlos has a half sack. Pressure percentage this is so great. I love when I can pull up the numbers live on the show. He's third among the defensive line in pressure percentage behind Darrell Taylor, who's at 11.2. That's just really good. And then Alton Robinson leads the team at 12.4. Basically, whenever Alton's in, he ain't in much, but he's just getting a lot of pressure. Carlos is one of the best players in the league at batting passes down, and probably maybe that's just because he's really tall. But I haven't done a full-on study on this, but my theory is that the change in the fronts, I don't know who we've talked about the fronts with, maybe Cliff Averill. The bare fronts, how they've aligned, basically puts 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, but the 2 guys on the edges basically have to be outside linebackers. That's something that people have complained to us about a lot. It's like, why is Carlos dropping in coverage? Why is Ben Samayo in coverage? Why is Brian Monet in coverage? Why is Poona Ford Al Woods in coverage? These are all great questions. There's logical answers to some of them, but the scheme has basically said, all right, Carlos, all right, Darrell, all right, Alton, all right, Benson, you're not just 5 techniques or Leos or whatever. You're essentially outside linebackers, and I don't think that's something that fits Carlos at all. I think the scheme change has screwed him, and it's basically limited him to being like a third down weapon, a really expensive pure pass rusher on third down situations. And I don't think he hasn't excelled enough in those situations. He's getting a lot of double teams and stuff like that. I think it's a combination of things. Performance on his part when he's getting the limited opportunities. It's how quick teams are getting the ball out on Seattle. Their average time to throw, I believe, is pretty low. I mean, like teams are getting it out fast. Seattle gets a lot of screens, so the ball's getting out fast too. I think they lead the league in screens thrown against them, which if you watch the Seahawks game, you can understand why teams would just call a bunch of screens. And then the other part is the scheme. The scheme, I think that change in particular really has screwed Benson and Carlos. It's asked them to be versions of what KJ Wright was last year, and they are just not that. Ooh, I like that answer. That was good. Got that in 2 minutes.
If the offense continues like this, will Waldron be back next season? Especially when factoring Pete could also be out of there.
Okay. Timer started. I'm not really sure. So if you keep Pete, I would imagine he gives Shane another run at it, regardless of who the quarterback is. And if you start to listen to Pete in these more recent press conferences, you can see like he's leaning pretty pro Shane. Like you ask him how Shane's doing and he gives all these excuses. He gives you all the things Shane hasn't had to work with. The O-linemen that have been hurt, not having Chris Carson, losing Russ. Like Pete goes to those things first. Like he's giving his guy the benefit of the doubt. Even listen to him talk about the Washington game. Like Pete basically made it sound. He's like, look, Shane's scheme guys open. Rusty couldn't hit the broadside of the bar. That's essentially what Pete was saying after the game, and he's not wrong. But like the fact that he's even willing to do that, is showing that he's giving Shane the benefit of the doubt. So if Pete's here, I do think that Shane gets at least another run at it. Probably, like I said, regardless of who the quarterback is. You know, let's say if there was a trade rush, get a haul, maybe trade him from Philly or the Giants, or even if you did get Taysom Hill back or something like that, you know, give Shane a chance to have a running game, have a healthy quarterback for a year. I do agree that like gauging your offensive coordinator with not a full year of one quarterback is that could be a quick trigger, especially with a guy who's in his first year doing the damn job. So do I think it matters who the OC is as long as Pete and Russ are here? No, we've talked about that a lot. But if Pete stays, I do think Shane is safe for the time being. I do think that Pete watches the tape, and I watch a little bit of it too, and I see that like, oh, okay, Shane is scheming some guys open. At the same time, their play action rate, their motion rates and stuff like that, it's not where I want it to be. But when I hear Pete talk about the relationship between run game and play action success, that makes me think that that's more like just of a Pete thing in terms of play action numbers and all that versus a Shane thing. So yeah, short answer is I think Shane is safe if Pete is safe. If Pete goes, then yeah, the whole staff is gone, and we just kind of build from there. I don't think if Pete goes, Shane can stay, like to work with just Russ. I think if Pete goes, Shane goes too.
Other than winning the Super Bowl, what's both of your favorite moments of the Seahawk era?
Ooh, that's a good
moment. Excuse me.
I think I have a bunch, but mine's probably just the tip with Sherm. I saw so much of myself in Sherm at the time. Just because like I felt I was smart, I'm smart, and people didn't think I was as smart as I looked because of the way we looked. I don't look like Sherm, but I look like Sherm, if that makes sense. Like he's just taller, similar skin complexion, hair about the same length, you know, just really consider ourselves to be really smart individuals. Like I would have went on TV and told Skip Bayless I'm better than you too, you know, like all that stuff. Like and then for the way Sherm was treated after that, with how the word thug got thrown around after he screamed on the reporter lady, Aaron Andrews, I think maybe. But Sherm brought so much of just being a badass to an underground city. We're an underground sports town. We're not Boston, LA, or New York. We're not front runners. And Sherm brought part of that, like, yo, no, yes, the hell we are. I'm the best right here, right now. So yeah, I thought the tip, for reasons for myself, but also just because it sent him to the Super Bowl, also was great. But yeah, that's probably if I had to pick one moment, that's my favorite.
I would go with Beastquake, and that's because it was. I remember watching that game live on TV, and I swear I felt like an earthquake. Like I just felt like I was in the stadium watching Marshawn get off me, little boy, child, and then he dives in the end zone holding his. You know what? That was iconic. I mean, hell, when I started playing flag football again, I was diving in the end zone holding my stuff. You know, I was letting everybody know I'm in there, and that was just a fun moment. Smiles comes to my face as I think about it and watching him do it. It was, that's a beast right there, man. He literally, I think he broke like 6 tackles.
Yeah, no, those are too good. And we're picking people as much as we're picking a moment too. Like Marshawn and Marshawn and Sherm defined the era because of who they were personally and how they performed, but who they were as a person influenced how they performed in a very unique way. Like where Marshawn was a run through a motherfucker's face type of guy as a person, and then his play matched that. Sherm was arrogant, in your face, and a badass. His play matched that. So yeah, that's a good pick. It's a good question by whoever threw that out there.
Any idea why the rest of us longtime Seahawks fans continue to put ourselves through the hope ringer? Any hope you can give them?
Yeah, there's some hope. I think that if I think you can build it if you have a top 10 quarterback, which at the worst, I think Russ, the sample size is there. I think he's one. You can rebuild the thing. I think you don't have to just bottom out. I think you can fix it. I think you just have to draft better. You look at what teams like that have kept their quarterback and their coach together. You look at like the Saints keeping Drew. How long did Drew Brees and Sean Payton do that, man? Like 15, 16 years or something like that. And it wasn't always pretty that whole time. You know, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing record. I don't think. But like you look at how they've built around Big Ben when he's been really good. Like Big Ben had years, he's like top 5 guy. and then it was like top 10 guy, and then he'll deteriorate a little bit, but they draft so well that they can put guys around him to complement him. And then like they had to change coaches, obviously, like Aaron Rodgers. But the goal in each of these situations is have the quarterback and build around him. And I think you can do that with Russ. That would be my kind of thing with the hope. I don't see much hope for reasons I outlined at the start of the podcast to just trade Russ, get a bunch of draft picks, and then give them to Pete and John. There's no reason over the last like 7 years or whatever to suggest that that's going to lead you to a rebuild. It's just not in my mind. I don't see the evidence to suggest that.
Quandre deserves some serious bread in the offseason. Bobby Wagner, he deserves another shot at the ring. As much as this fan would love to see those two playing for the Hawks next season, how realistic do you think that actually is?
I wish the Seahawks would have paid Quandre, not because he's a friend of the show, but like he's a good player. Like people are seeing it. Like he should be a Pro Bowler. He leads NFC free safeties and Pro Bowl votes. Like he's a baller. Like he plays the game the right way. He's a good player. The reason I wanted them to pay him before the year is because they're not going to be able to afford him. After I knew he was going to play well, right? So it's like, all right, if Quandre's already like a top 10 safety, and I think he's going to have another good year, and then now he's like, legitimately like a top 5 safety in a contract season, and he's going to turn 29 in January. I was like, you guys are fooling yourselves. It's almost like the Frank Clark, Shaquille Griffin dilemma that they had before those final years. Like if you don't pay them right now in August, by March they're going to be way more than you want to spend. And I could see that. You could see that coming in both scenarios. And because I watched those play out, I could see those coming with Quandre. And I don't think that, sadly, I think it's going to be really hard if you rebuild, if any form of those rebuilds happened, bringing Bobby back at that cap number, I could see them not wanting to do. I think his cap number goes up to like 20 million or something. I'll look it up while you get to the next question. But like, do I think Bobby has value? Of course. I think he's a stabling force in a way that's just hard to quantify. Every team needs those vets. You need those vets who just are that present in the moment guy who they rally around, other dudes rally around them. Like go listen to Trey Brown's press conferences and talk about and listen to how much Bobby meant to him. Just getting his mind right when he had those knee injuries, how much Bobby's meant to Jordan Brooks, getting his mind right, teaching him how to watch film. You do need those vets. It just comes down to, do you need those vets at like whatever percentage of the cap they're on? Like there's a hard salary cap. So like, would I keep him? Sure. But not even sure. Absolutely yes. But because I think there's so much little value in that affects other guys on the team that you need to develop, these draft picks that you need to hit on. But I could easily see any form of a rebuild being like, at this cap number, we just can't feasibly make that happen and increase the roster in the ways we need to.
I've noticed Russ doesn't even look at DK, despite Washington football team playing man without safety help on crucial third downs. Why isn't Russ giving him those opportunities?
Real quick on Bobby. Yeah, next year cap number is 20.3 million. So that's going to be hard to hold on. And he doesn't have any guaranteed money left after this year. It looks like they saved 16.6 mil if you were to cut him or something. So yeah, I don't think they should do that, but it's the NFL. We've seen this. So he does look at DK, but I think it really is. It's such a product of one of Russ's deficiencies as a player. Not deficiencies is too strong, but just limitations. Because you would see a lot of players have this. Tyler's had stretches. Tyler's had like entire halves of seasons where it's like, are you on the team? Like it's so weird. Doug didn't have a ton of them, but like if you've fantasy helps us really keep this in perspective of how productive guys are being. Like there would be some stretches where like, man, it's been like a month and Doug's had like 2 catches a game, or something like that. One of them would be like a big play action touchdown or something like that. But like, why can't we force feed our guy, even though the defense knows it's coming, the way like Big Ben was able to feed AB and Big Ben even able to feed that Deontay Johnson dude every goddamn week. Those are to that dude a lot. Or like how the Texans were able to feed D-Hop, or the way the Packers feed Adams. There's just so many examples around the league, and I think that it's not even, he does look at him. but it's just not enough. I feel like they try to. Here's my theory. This is the short version of it. I think they try to let the defense dictate how DK is going to get the ball instead of forcing that issue. Like, force them to adjust to how you're getting DK the ball.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell. I don't care if they triple team DK on every play, that you should have an offense where DK don't get a target for the entire half. I don't care how many
30
plays.
minutes.
Just honestly, I tweeted this during the game. Sometimes just snap the ball and throw it to him. That's it. There's a really good example of them doing this, and I really think it was an option. I need to ask Russ. I think it's the Dolphins in 2020, week 4.
Yes.
I think it looks like a run play,
And
but Russ just snaps it, throws it to DK. He makes it miss. It picks up like 30 yards down to the 1. I think Chris Carson scores in the next play. It's like, you can do that. Guys play off of DK enough, especially when he's on the short side of the field. So it's a shorter throw. Like if he just catches it, turns right or left, doesn't matter. Like on the short side of the field, you can get there real fast. DK makes the guy miss, and that's basically a run play. No, you don't put your quarterback in harm's way. Your linemen aren't asked to like do a lot of pass sets. It's just boom, boom, boom. I really don't understand why even that. Are those going to gain a bunch of yards every time? No, but it's just another thing you have to defend. Because how do you stop that, Chris? Well, then the corner's got to come up. It just changes everything. That's how you dictate what you're going to do, or you dictate what they're going to do based on how you are performing, not the other way around. Like, they're playing us like this, so here's how we'll use DK. No, man, DK is a freaking nature, man. So yeah, that's not going to change though. That's why another reason why I think this is broken. They're not going to start changing that in week 13. DK's in year 3. Even when Geno was the quarterback, DK would have these long stretches where he just didn't get the ball. Not even a target, not catches. I'm talking targets. It's just crazy that this stuff happens, man. That's one of those things where I'm with the fans. Like, I don't have a good answer for that, and it's stupid. The answers they give us are stupid, and I really don't have. I can't help that. It's just a broken scheme.
How was Jordan Brooks developing? With hindsight, would you have re-signed KJ Wright?
I think Jordan's fine. I do think that needing to take him off the field to make your third down defense better is quite the red flag for a first round pick. You shouldn't have to come off the field in those situations. Like, and I mean the dime package, you swap Ryan Neal for Jordan Brooks. I shouldn't have to do that with you for a first round pick. Maybe a second round guy. But like, I know Bobby's the extreme example, but like, even look at KJ Wright. KJ Wright was a 4th round pick, and you don't have to do that. You didn't have to do that with him. Bobby's a 2nd round pick, and it's like, all right, yeah, he's obviously a 3-down guy. I mean, even now, look how Bobby played that seam ball that ends up getting picked by Jamal. Perfect read of this. Louis Riddick talked about on the broadcast. You carry the number 3 up the seam. And makes it a hard throw. Quandre whacks him. Bobby actually gets a hand on the ball. I didn't realize that in real time. So, like, he's a 3-down guy. I want a 3-down linebacker in the first round. So I think that's where I'm kind of at. Even if you're really good on those first and second downs, like, I need you at least out there on third down. They were taking him off the field third down last year in favor of KJ. And would I have kept KJ? Yeah. In part because not just a Jordan thing, for the screen game, because there's no way they should be this bad at defending screens. And Jordan has taken a lot of the blame for that. And I think that's part of it. The other part is not having KJ has forced them to basically ask Benson Mayowa and Carlos Dunlap and other guys to be the coverage outside linebackers. It was like, that's not their thing. We saw that in the first Raider game in the preseason, Alden Robinson covering Zay Jones on a wheel route. And everybody's like, Mike, what the hell is this scheme? I was like, I get the scheme, but it's like, if you're doing that at the expense of having those guys rush the passer, it's like, you might as well have just kept KJ.
Which players should the Seahawks keep for a rebuild, and which ones should they let go to accumulate draft picks, cap, you name it?
Okay, this is tricky. I got the timer on this one. It just depends on which direction you want to go. Like, if you want to keep... Okay, here's the tricky part. Last offseason, there was a real good argument that they would have been better off, maybe not better off in the short term, but the long-term play was to trade Tyler. And knowing that you have to pay DK this year, and then just drafting a receiver. Because remember, last year's receiver draft was really heavy. They could have drafted
Bondale.
Could they have? No, maybe he went before.
Before, I think so.
But I'm saying, but you would have had let's say you traded him to the Jacksonville Jaguars or something like that and got a second round pick in the 30s something like that. Maybe you get like Elijah Moore that's on the Jets right now, right? And you get him on a rookie deal with DK. Let's hit Ole Miss together. I think you have a lot more cap space. Maybe you can use that on linemen or something like that. You take a little bit of a step back in the passing game, but maybe that makes your pass pro better. Maybe then you use a little bit of that money to bring in another veteran or something like that. I don't know. You bring in like, I don't freaking know, Deshaun Jackson, Marvin Jones. I don't know, just some like low cost dude or something like that. And then you pay DK and kind of roll with that, because now you can't really move Tyler's contract. You can't move Jamal's contract. You can move Bobby's, but you're not going to get anything for that. You could move Russ's contract, but then you don't have a quarterback. You could. The only person that's getting you a first round pick that's not Russ in this year's draft is DK. And I don't. I could see easily like Mike, we can't pay DK $25 million a year. I'm like, you could. I would. Like that dude, I would find ways to get that guy the ball. It's really, I think he's just a monster. So it depends on which direction you want to go. I think you're basically just going to unload guys, eat a bunch of guaranteed signing bonuses you've already given to get day 3 picks. Like how many people are realistically getting you a day 2 pick if you trade them right now that aren't Russ? DK gets you a first for sure. Like, but then after that, who are you moving to get picks? I really don't think anybody. You move Bobby, you might get a day 3 just because his cap hit so high. Maybe you get a late day 2, but then now you need a linebacker, right? So
you just create another problem,
right? So it's like, all right, you can't move Tyler's contract; it's too new. You could tag maybe and trade Quandre, but you need a free safety. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like this. I don't think they're in a position to just unload. They've kind of put themselves into a win now type of thing. The only person, like I said, the only person that's in a Frank Clark type of situation that you could trade is DK. And that, I mean, you could. There's other receiver talent coming up in the draft too. I just don't think that's what I would do, because I think DK is a goddamn beast. So yeah, it's tough, but he's really the only movable piece, I think, unless you want to get rid of like Jordan Brooks or something.
Worst case Russ trade. Where does Russ land?
The worst case Russ trade?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the division, it's the worst one. But I don't. There's not one after that. Yeah, the worst one is you get like Trey Lance or something like that from the Niners, and they just cut Jimmy G or something, and then you give Russ, Kyle Shanahan, that O-line and that run game, and you're like, well, damn. Now they're just gonna, and then you give him the weapons, all of those yards after catch weapons like Debo and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and stuff, and it's like, good lord, you know, that's like the worst case.
And then what's the most likely?
I think the most likely is probably the Saints, because remember, Russ has got the no trade, so he's got to agree to the team, and he's gonna want to go somewhere with competent ownership that's proven they can build around a quarterback with a good play caller. And I think that the Saints check those boxes. Ideally, it would be an AFC team. I just don't think the AFC teams check those boxes. The Raiders don't, without Gruden in Russ's eyes, I don't believe. And even with Gruden, their ownership's just not great. So I could see that being an issue. So ideally, if you're Seattle, you send them to an AFC team. But I think a bunch of NFC teams make some sense. The only AFC team that you could possibly think is Miami. But who knows how long their coach is going to last over there and how their GM and ownership structure looks. So I wouldn't. Russ isn't going to Houston, not to play with that ownership. So I think the Saints is like the most likely in my head.
Has the offense been bad since week 1, and how much of the blame is on Russ, and how much is it on Shane?
So the one thing I'll say about this is that the offense has been bad in spots and been okay. In those first 4 weeks, they were okay. They were putting up decent enough points. They were just bad in third quarters, if you guys remember that. But I do think that the thing I have about week 1, and I asked Shane Waldron about this, and he just danced around it, and it was annoying. But aesthetically, it looked a certain way. We were so hype after week 1. I wrote about all these things that they were doing that looked cool, and they worked against a team that I thought had a good defense. And they stopped doing all of that stuff. They do a little bit of it here and there, but it seemed like they were in their bag that first game aesthetically. I'm talking about how the designs of the plays looked and were executed. Now the blocking was good in some of those, a couple of bad coverages on the deep balls to Tyler that kind of helped make the numbers look a little better. But like, I just thought in general, aesthetically, it looked cool against Indy, and it's never even looked like that again. It just looks dry. They do a little bit of the motion stuff, and the play action numbers are getting better, but it's like, you guys it doesn't look that cool to me anymore. And maybe and I just don't know. My next goal, I have a lot of goals, but one of them is to find out why that happened. Why after week 1 it stopped looking like that. I don't know the answer. That's one of the things on my chat. I got my notepad right here. I'm gonna find out. That's on my list of things to find out, because that makes no freaking sense.
Are we learning that Pete Carroll was right all along and not building the offense around Russ in the past, and that this whole time Russ capped out as a Ferrari version of Ryan Tannehill, and that he'll always be at his best and play action complement to the running game?
I think there's some things that were right about Russ that were dismissed while he was playing really well. You know, the height thing, the middle of the field thing, the tempo thing, the quick game thing. I think there were a lot of criticisms early in his career that were getting dismissed because he was so goddamn good and the team was so goddamn good. But you even heard some of it from like his teammates, or you heard like rumblings in the locker room. And there were like GMs would like go anonymously say that type of stuff. And I think it's always been true. It's just how true was it and how much it mattered. That's the thing. It's like, how much did it matter? Like, okay, Russ doesn't throw the middle field that much. Okay, how much does that matter? Because he's still balling every year, protecting the ball every year, accurate every year, explosive plays every year, making Pro Bowls every year. So how much did it matter? And the answer was not very much, because also he was a very good scrambler and improviser. Now that started to change a little bit. And remember, that's one of the things that Shotty came in and changed. Like, hey, bro, you're not about to be triple axling in the backfield here. We're going to work on your footwork. And you stop turning your back and taking 12-yard sacks when you get flustered. And that's something that Shotty really did, like another aesthetic thing. Like that did change. If you go back and look, it definitely, he stopped spinning around, getting cracked for 13 yards and would then like just crouch down, have those little quick feet, and then find his guys and step up in the pocket a lot more. So I think there were some things, not just Pete, but there was a lot of criticisms that are just getting, what's the word? I think of the word here, Chris. Exacerbated, accentuated, highlighted. It's just
all
more.
those.
Yeah, all of this is more on display now. Like Russ has always been like a below average third down passer statistically. That's just kind of, it's not even like a opinion thing. Like you go look at his third down stuff. Outside of 2015, the Seahawks aren't like a great third down team. Third and medium, they're okay. But then like obvious passing situations on third down, they've just been bad for the whole decade of Russ. Like all of those limitations always existed and they were always right. It's just a matter of how much they mattered. They just matter a lot more now. And the running game matters more than ever, perhaps now. And then now it's just not there. I don't know if Pete necessarily needs to build around the run game. I still think you build around Russ, but you build around Russ with a complementary running game. You know, not the other way around. Not like the Jets were built with Mark Sanchez and ground and pound. Like they still think you can air it, but you should be able to have that counterpunch of a run game if they try to take it away. But I do think we're all seeing now those limitations that people talked about, Russ's height and where he'll throw the field and the ability to run a quick game offense. That was all right. It just didn't matter because he was still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and now he's not performing like that. So now it all how much does it matter has increased in the last like year and change.
Any big time free agents you can see in the offseason that the Hawks could A, afford, and B, would make a serious impact?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. I don't know who's scheduled to be a free agent.
Man, you want to start wide receivers? Where you want to start, Mike?
Give me some. Well, they need tackles. They need offensive tackles. Both their tackles are scheduled to be free agents, so that's tough. I'm not sure. That might be something we have to revisit after the year, and I gotta look at the draft too. That's when I'm a little early on that one.
I can give you some tackles.
All right,
I don't know how many.
Give me some.
Yeah, Jason Kelsey. He's a little old. He's a veteran, but that could be useful. Matt Paradis. Ryan Jensen, Justin Britt, Ben Jones, Tyler Shatley, Austin Corbett, Nick Martin.
These names are not. It
No
sounds
one-
like a lot of centers too. Yeah, this is not sounding great. Yeah, I think that's going to be a tough position for them. Maybe they rely on Stone Forsythe next year, and
Hasn't played a snap. Red shirt.
yeah, and then they've got the red shirt on the Jake Curran guy from Cal. If they were to hit on both of those, that would be crazy. Perhaps I think Mike Solari is a good O-line coach for what it's worth. Really good one, actually. But yeah, they've got to build there. They've got to build in the trenches again. Like I said to the other question, if you give me an O-line and you give me a quarterback, I will bring you back a good offense. It doesn't even matter what else you give me after that. Give me good O-line, good quarterback. I'll take care of the rest.
Is Russ unhealthy or cooked? He hasn't looked right all year and a good chunk of last season as well.
I don't think it's unhealthy. He's definitely not right. I can't know how much is tied to the finger. I don't have his my fingers look fine, so I don't know. I look at his finger. Finger looks cool. You know, I don't know about the health part. I know he doesn't look right, but I can't like explain why he looks right. At least place it on his finger. I will say I think it more goes back to he's not cooked either. It just goes back to what he's not good at is just more on display. I like exacerbated. That's gotta be the way to use that word. How you spell that? I'm gonna look it up.
I have no idea.
Oh, here you go. That's exasperated. Is that what I want? No, exacerbated. There we go. Make a problem or a bad situation worse. Yes. Boom. Exacerbated. Yes. What Russ's limitations have been that word more in the last like year and a half. I just think that's what it is. Teams have kind of like, okay, cool. We're just going to make sure you can't kill us with the thing that you like to kill us with, throwing the ball. And there's just a natural way to do that with, split safety coverages because you're protecting the numbers. You got a corner underneath, you got a safety over top. It's just such a natural coverage. That's like you have to throw over the middle of the field. You have to make that throw he made to Freddie Swain on the touchdown on Monday night. That was against split safety coverage. Freddie ran the post from the slot, I want to say, right into where you're supposed to throw it. The linebacker, safety, whatever, didn't cover. It covers Freddie up the field. Safety is playing the outsides. Boom. That throw is what Russ doesn't hit routinely. And until he does, teams are just going to keep playing that coverage. So I don't think he's cooked or it's as much of the finger as much as his limitations are being, what's the word again, Chris? Exacerbated. Yes, there's limitations are being exacerbated in the last year or so.
What does Pete Carroll do well as a coach?
Oh, that's an unfair. I think Pete does some things good Pete gets his players to play for him. And I think that's a really underrated part of look at the defense yesterday. Let's just look at that as an example. Them boys they're getting left out to dry again in these last few, just their offense is they're breaking records for 3 and outs. How many 3 and outs they have in a row on Monday? 5? 5 3 and outs in a row. I think it was the second time
it was a lot.
They've had 5 3 and outs in a row, and then their 6th punt after that was a 5-play drive. And the defense was getting left and look at how long that final Washington drive was. It was 8 or 9 minutes. Got down to 4th and goal at the 3, and they were like, "Look, we have to keep fighting. We have to believe there's a blade of grass. We'll defend it." I really think that's I think that's a Pete thing. His guys do not fold. In that Packers game, they was fighting tooth and nail, bro. They was like, dude, we've held the Packers to 3 points for 3 quarters, bro. Can you guys at least score something? And the offense was like, nope. And it's we done picked off Aaron Rodgers, in the end zone. They're doing so much. They're believing in each other, even when at times when they're just a trash defense. And I think that's a tribute to a coaching thing. Yes. Is it his fault the defense starts off bad in the first place? Maybe with the personnel? Yes. But just in general, I think to get guys to believe and play for you and play for each other. Maybe they're not even playing for him. Maybe they're just playing for each other. But I think that's a coaching thing too. I think the last thing Pete's done, at least from my view, is lose the locker room. And I think look at all the coaches who get fired. Look at all the anonymous articles that come out about how many people just didn't like him and guys were tuning him out or whatever. I think that while there's been some examples of Pete getting criticism from his players, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, even I think Doug to some extent. Like at the end of the day, like when guys get on the field, they're either playing for the coaches or playing for the guy next to him, and that's the thing you can coach up. I think that's he does a few other things well, and there's a bunch of things not well. But I think that in particular is it's really hard to find guys who can do that year after year after year to get guys to play with them, especially in hard times.
How do I, as a fan, cope with this season?
Yeah, that's a good question. Find a vice, alcohol, smoke some weed, or just don't watch. I've been telling people sometimes, especially if you overseas or something like that. Like I've been telling people, hey man, don't stay up till 5 a.m. to watch this. Like when they got flexed out of primetime for a week, whatever week's coming up, it's like, yeah, ain't nobody trying to see that. Like if you don't want to stay up till 5 a.m. because you in Brazil or Spain or London or Germany or whatever, you ain't trying to watch it, just don't watch. Nothing forces you to watch. I'm a Wazoo basketball fan. Them final years of them Ernie Kent days, I wasn't watching that. I wasn't gonna let that take my spirit. No. So I think that's an option that I don't think people really like legitimately consider because we're addicted to football in ways that we're not addicted to other sports. But I think if you've been a fan of Husky athletics during their bad years, some of the Willingham years or the end of those Romar years or some of the other just lean time periods, or the Mariners at all, like you've learned, just turn off the TV. You ain't got to watch. I think the Seahawks, we're not used to them being in that space, but yeah, they might be in that space too.
They give you the GM cap, Mike. How'd you like to throw on the hat?
Okay. I don't got no hats near me right now, but yeah. All right.
Would you accept any of the following trades for Russ? Hurts plus 2 first-round picks.
Oh, Jalen Hurts.
Excuse me. Yeah, let me give you both names. Justin Fields plus 2 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks from the New York Giants or Miami, etc.
I would take the deals that have a quarterback in them over the deals that do not.
So that would be Jalen Hurts plus 2 first-round picks and Justin Fields plus 2 first-round picks.
Oh, if you give me Fields and 2 first-rounders, I'm taking that. I haven't watched a ton of him. I just think he's a better passer than Jalen. I think with Jalen, you have to like legitimately run like a college offense. Like I think that's kind of what I've come to. You got to basically RPO it up and have him kind of run around, which is fine. In Baltimore doing some of that in early Lamar years too. But I think with Justin, you can start that way, kind of like you did with Russ. Like, okay, we're going to heavy play action you. We're going but Justin will make them throws though. Ooh, boy, that boy ain't afraid. And then you can ease him into like, okay, now you're the guy. So I think I think Dak might have had a similar trajectory. So yeah, that's the best one of those. You give me, even I don't care if it's in the NFC. You give me Justin and a couple firsts, because that way I don't have to be bad enough to be drafting a quarterback early. I already got my guy. So even if those picks I give you end up being anywhere from pick 18 to pick 32, I don't care because I don't need a quarterback. I just need a good player in that era, in that realm of the draft. Versus if from the Giants, if I take that deal or the Miami deal and I don't get Tua back, then I need to still draft. I still need to be bad enough. I need those picks to be high enough for me to get a quarterback. Whereas those other like Fields or whatever Hurts, I have the quarterback already, so I'm good. I think I like Justin over Jalen.
Let's stick with the NFC and see what you think about this trade. You think we could trade Russ for Daniel Jones, a first and a second?
Why would you do that? I wouldn't do that. Daniel Jones is not good. You think Daniel Jones is good?
Hey, I just wanted to read that to you because I was like,
Jones is not good, bro. He is not. He is bad. He's inaccurate from what I can tell. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but inaccurate from what I can tell. He turns the ball over a lot, and I just don't. We talked about that before when I talked about Josh Allen in his earlier years.
Hell, Carson Wentz.
Yeah, Carson. Guys who turn the ball over a lot, that turns me off. Like I can't have that. Justin Fields' sack numbers are pretty high. Like his sack percentage is pretty high.
Oh hell, Russell Wilson was last year.
Yeah, I think Justin Fields and Russ have the 2 highest sack percentages. So maybe that's why I'm drawn to Justin. But I think I can build around. Just like I think you can build around Russ, I think you can build around Justin. I think he's going to be. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being the best quarterback of that draft, even though Mac Jones is playing well. So yeah, I just wouldn't. Hell no. Just like I feel about Taysom Hill, I don't want Daniel Jones either. Daniel Jones is not good.
What's the best case scenario for the rest of this season?
That's a really fast. Is this the last one?
That is it.
Yeah, that's felt like the last one. I could just feel it. Best case scenario. That's a good question.
They went out. There you go.
I don't know if that's the best, because I do feel like you need to make change. I don't like. Do they make change at 9-8? You know, like, and then what are the changes? Like when they went 9-7, the change they made was Pete doubling down on this being Pete's team. And I'm not really sure how great of an idea that was. Like, if you remember 2017, he fired Tom Cable, who had like personnel control as an assistant coach.
Not good.
Fired Tom Cable, fired Daryl Bevel, fired Chris Richard. And it was at a time period where it's like, oh, maybe this is Russ's team now. The Legion of Boom was hurt. Cam Chancellor was hurt. Cliff Everett was hurt. I think they traded Michael Bennett. They cut Sherm. Earl held out. Like, it was very clear, like, if it's going to be Russ's team, it's now. And it seemed like it doubled down on being Pete's team, of like hiring his guy in Ken Norton, finding Brian Schottenheimer, and then becoming the most run-heavy team in the NFL, drafting a running back in the first round. Like, it was just this double down on Pete, I thought, after the 2017 season. And I think you could get something very similar if you finish 9-8 this season. Russ wasn't as pissed back then as he seems to be now, but the point stands. I think that 9-8, you could argue that gets us closer to the status quo, which actually gets us closer to being like 3-14 next year than it does being 14-3 next year. So I think the best case is Russ starts to play better, but they still don't win out. So that way Russ's trade value is still high if they need to do that. And I think that that's it. I really think it's just that Russ figures it out so he still has trade value. Because even if you don't trade him, you want the value to be there. I don't think that's a good point. Yeah, winning out would be fun, but I don't think in the big picture that's the best thing. Although that is the best thing for this season, I don't know if that's the best big picture to go 9-8.
Wow. Well, we got through it, Mike.
Woo.
We want to thank all of you out there for your Twitter questions. We set a record. New one. Another loss. Another bunch of Twitter questions. We appreciate it. Wow. I don't know what we're going to do next week or this week for another show.
I think this will be it till the Niners game, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll just have to pivot depending on if these guys keep losing. So just stick with this. Shout out to everyone who subscribed. You guys,
yes,
1,000 on YouTube. Keep showing the love. It doesn't matter if you listen on Spotify, Apple, The Athletic, whatever, Google Podcast, wherever we're at. We appreciate all that love. Yeah, we're everywhere. So appreciate all that love. Keep showing us that love. We're gonna keep doing the show, even though these guys is
poop soup.
Yeah, being just scrubs as a team every week. So appreciate you guys. We will, like I said, this will be it until the Niners game. We'll come back after the Niners game and talk about that, and then we'll proceed from there. Maybe we'll line up some guests for you guys. So until then, we appreciate the Twitter questions. We appreciate the love, and we will catch you guys next week. Peace.